The following crimes took place between 1969 and 1970. Jose Domingos Borrego, also known as Zé Borrego, was born in the early 1920s in the Beira Baixa highlands, Portugal. His early life is shrouded in mystery, but we know that he was a man forged by poverty, superstition, and a rigid moral code. Raised in a devout Catholic working-class family, Borrego grew up in a world where faith and folklore intertwined closely with each other. His mother, a domineering figure, instilled a fierce religiosity laced with fear of sin that shaped his psyche. But it's said that at the age of 6, he was abandoned by his family. Working odd jobs during his youth, he had a small stint in the armed forces, claiming that for the first time in his life, he was well fed and slept well. Physically imposing, tall, muscular, with massive hands likened to those of a wolf's paws, Borrego distinguished himself within his small community. He worked as a scrap dealer, a grueling trade that took him across Portugal's rugged landscapes and underdeveloped roads. This nomadic lifestyle isolated him, reinforcing his insular worldview. Borrego's great faith and equally great dosage of superstition blended Catholic devotion with rural mysticism. He believed in divine omens, a mindset rooted in Beira Baixa's folklore-heavy culture, where visions of saints were revered. By the late 1960s, Borrego's life shifted dramatically. He left the mountains for Lisbon, a city that was rapidly modernizing. His stated mission to the capital was chilling and simple: to kill homosexual men, whom he viewed as sinners who defied the laws of God. Borrego claimed this purpose came from a vision of Our Lady, the Virgin Mary, who, and I quote, ordered me to end the sin of male homosexuality. This religious delusion, paired with his physical strength and lack of formal education, made him a predator in a city unprepared for such a killer. Lisbon in 1969 was a paradox, urban progress clashing with puritanical morality, providing Borrego both anonymity and prey. His psyche, a volatile mix of faith, rage, and superstition, was primed for violence. Borrego, with his imposing frame, weathered face, and disarming rural accent, posed as a potential partner, exploiting the trust of men desperate for a deep connection. He visited Bairro Alto smoky bars, Cais dos Sodres dockside taverns, and Alfama's shadowy alleys. His modus operandi was brutally efficient. He seduced victims with promises of intimacy, leveraging his charisma to lure them to cheap rooms in dingy boarding houses with creaking beds and peeling walls. In these isolated rooms, he struck them without warning. Using his massive hands, he strangled his victims, crushing their windpipes with such force that cartilage splintered, blood vessels ruptured, and their faces turning purple. Some would fight back, clawing at his forearms, blood under their nails, but Borrego's strength overwhelmed them, their gasps fading into silence. The post-mortem ritual consisted of Borrego dismembering the bodies with a knife or a cleaver, blood spraying as he sawed through muscle and bone, organs spilling onto the floor. He stuffed the remains into plastic bags before dumping them in the Tagus River near Passo de Arcos or the Trancão River in Sacavém, where currents dispersed the evidence. Borrego killed 5 men over a span of 13 months, a pace that stunned investigators. As previously mentioned, his motive for the crimes was to eradicate the sin of homosexuality, a mission that he believed was ordained by Our Lady, seeing each killing as a sacred act, cleansing Lisbon of moral decay. Now, it should be highlighted that homosexuality in Portugal at this time period was illegal. Gay men were either being arrested, institutionalized, or being shunned by society. It was reported that the police often dismissed missing gay men as either runaways or deviants, which allowed Borrego to operate undetected for over a year. It should therefore constitute little surprise that the 5 victims of Zé Borrego were all homosexuals, and what makes this case even more heartbreaking is that their identities remain largely unknown, their names forgotten by time. All of his victims were aged approximately 20 to 35 years old, who frequented Lisbon's clandestine gay scene, bars, parks and bathhouses in Bairro Alto, Cais do Sodre, and Alfama. The first victim, estimated to be in his 20s, took place in February of 1969. Based on the available details, which is sparse, a young laborer, possibly a construction worker, met Borrego in a dimly lit bar near Bairro Alto. Lured to a cheap boarding house with promises of intimacy, he was strangled, Borrego's massive hands crushing his windpipe, cartilage snapping as blood vessels burst in his eyes, blood trickling from his nose. His body was dismembered with a knife, torso split open, limbs hacked, blood pooling on the floor, before being stuffed into plastic bags, dumped in the Tagus River near Passo de Arcos. The second victim, estimated to be in his 30s, was killed by Borrego in April of 1969. He was either a clerk or a shop assistant who encountered Borrego in a tavern near Cais do Sodre. Also taken to a boarding house, he was throttled, his neck bruised purple, blood frothing at his mouth from a crushed larynx. Borrego dismembered him, the knife slicing through muscle and bone, blood soaking the room's wooden boards. The remains, wrapped in plastic, was scattered along the Trancão River in Secavém. The third victim, estimated to be in his 20s, was murdered in August of 1969. Either a student or a drifter, they met in a park near the Rocio, taken to a boarding house once again, where he was strangled, his face contorted, blood pooling under his head from a skull fracture caused by Borrego's grip. His body parts, arms severed, torso gutted, were found in the Tagus. The fourth victim, believed to be in his 30s, was murdered in January of 1970, possibly a dock worker lured from a bar near Alfama. Strangled, his chest collapsed under Borrego's hands, blood staining his lips. Dismembered with a cleaver, blood spraying as bones cracked, his remains were dumped near Secavém. And finally, the fifth victim, believed to be in his 20s, was murdered in March of 1970. A bar patron, he met Borrego in a Bairro Alto dive. Borrego strangled him, leaving deep finger marks on his throat, blood seeping from his mouth onto the sheets. His body, hacked into pieces, organs spilling, blood congealing, was discarded in the Tagus. These 5 men, targeted for their sexuality, their bodies desecrated to fulfill Borrego's delusional mission. Their marginal status, often estranged from families, living in secrecy, meant their disappearances went almost unnoticed. Borrego's reign, however, would quickly end in March of 1970, sparked by gruesome discoveries in Lisbon's rivers. Fishermen near Passo de Arcos found plastic bags in the Tagus, leaking blood and containing a severed torso with the arms hacked off whilst their flesh was rotting. Days later, Secavém locals reported a leg in the Trancão River, caught in the reeds, bloodstains darkening the water. The judiciary police, initially baffled, linked the cases through the dismemberment pattern, clean deliberate cuts, suggesting that whoever did this was experienced. A breakthrough came via a boarding house owner in Bairro Alto, who reported a large man renting rooms frequently, leaving bloodstains on sheets and a stench of decay that remained in the room. Shortly afterwards, Borrego was arrested in Lisbon, his overwhelming frame being unmistakably distinctive as he was cuffed in a Cais do Sodre alley. Under interrogation, he confessed with eerie calm, and I quote, "I strangled them to stop the sin. Our Lady told me to." He led police to dump sites, pointing to Tagus riverbanks where bags floated, blood-tinted water swirling, and Trancão reeds hiding limbs. Borrego's cooperation unnerved the police. It is said that a peculiar bond he formed with the lead investigator, whom he saw as a confidant, sharing his divine mission over the weeks of the investigation. He also revealed his plans to kill 2 prison guards who were beating him whilst in custody, their names jotted down in a notebook. His confessions, chilling in their detail, cemented his status as Portugal's first documented serial killer. José Borrego's trial, held in Lisbon in late 1970 or early 71, was a subdued affair, receiving little publicity from the media. Homosexuality was a taboo subject, and the regime suppressed publicity to avoid moral panic or scrutiny of its homophobic laws. And given the wave of social liberalization that was undertaking around this time period in the country. The goals of the regime was to uphold an upstanding image of its leaders and its policies. It was noted that the courtroom, a stark chamber in Lisbon's tribunal, was sparsely attended, with newspapers publishing vague sanitized reports under orders from the state. Borrego faced 5 counts of murder, although additional charges, such as desecrating a corpse, was considered but later dropped to expedite the case. The prosecution portrayed Borrego as a calculating predator, his minute confessions detailing each strangulation and their ultimate demise. Witnesses, including the boarding house's owners, described blood-soaked mattresses and Borrego calm departures carrying bags that dripped blood. The judiciary investigator testified to Borrego's religious zeal, quoting his claim, "Our Lady showed me the sinners." Physical evidence, bloodied knives, plastic bags, and riverine remains corroborated his guilt. Borrego's defense team argued insanity, citing his visions of Our Lady and rural mysticism. A court-appointed psychiatrist diagnosed religious mania with possible schizophrenia, noting his fixation on divine orders as delusional. However, his methodical approach, seducing victims, choosing isolated boarding houses, disposing of bodies systematically, suggested full awareness, undermining the insanity plea. Borrego showed no remorse, staring blankly as victims' families, few in attendance due to social shame, wept silently. Borrego was soon convicted and sentenced to 25 years in the Lisbon penitentiary, the maximum sentence for murder under Portuguese law. Borrego's imprisonment was marked by turmoil. He was described as a troubled inmate, where his crimes and large stature made him a target. As previously stated, his confession to the judiciary investigator regarding his desire to kill 2 guards who beat him led to his placement in solitary confinement. His cell, a concrete box stained with blood from self-inflicted cuts, a sign of his mental decline. Borrego's behavior swung between piety and rage. It suggested he clung to religion, praying obsessively to Our Lady, but his visions persisted, sparking violent outbursts. He would receive no psychiatric treatment whilst in prison. In 1972, not long after his sentencing, Borrego hanged himself in his cell, with guards finding Borrego dangling from a bedsheet tied to a pipe. His face was ashen, blood from self-inflicted wounds pooling beneath him, his massive hands lying limp. His suicide, unreported at the time, closed a dark chapter but offered no closure to the victims' families. Borrego was likely a delusional zealot with psychopathic tendencies, his faith a veneer for deep-seated hatred amplified by an untreated mind. Although this case remains largely unknown, it is one that deeply disturbed me whilst investigating it. As to the victims, no public memorials exist, and it has even been speculated that some were never identified, their bones lost to the Tagus currents, never to be seen by anyone ever again.